So thank you very much, everybody. I'm your host for today in partnership with my colleague Søren. Welcome to this first event, which is the very first event of our 7th annual Energy Efficiency Conference. And I'm going to just introduce our colleagues for the opening remarks. And we'll start, please, with Dr. Brian Motherway, Head of Energy Efficiency at the IEA.
Good morning. Mel is right, you can't see anything from up here. But it's great to see human beings in 3 dimensions, not on screen. We have many colleagues on screen and you're very welcome, but I must say there's an extra buzz about being in a room full of people again. It's very nice. And as Mel said, this is the first event in the 7th annual Global Energy Efficiency Conference that we've organized. And undoubtedly, this is the biggest and most significant conference we've held, and I want to start by thanking our partners, the Ministry in Denmark and Danfoss, and we've had a great welcome here in Sønderborg, and Danfoss and the Ministry and all of our Danish colleagues have been really supportive in getting everything organized. As I think you'll see, if you haven't already over the next couple of days, we have a lovely venue here in Sønderborg. We have some lovely rooms we're going to be in, some lovely events we're going to share, and we're delighted to be able to have you all here in person sharing that with us. It is our 7th annual event, and this is something we want to do every year to build the profile of energy efficiency, particularly at a senior level. Over the next couple of days, we have a lot of ministers, senior officials, CEOs, and other leading thinkers, as well as many efficiency and energy experts from around the world, coming together to really focus on action around energy efficiency. How can we accelerate it? How can we learn from each other to go home and take further, stronger action? And of course, that couldn't be more timely. We all know the case for energy efficiency, I think, in this room and on this call. But sometimes I think it's fair to say that when you hear conversations about energy or climate or those kind of issues, the demand side and efficiency doesn't feature as much as we would like to see. There's still a bit of a supply side focus. We still think in terms of let's build more wind turbines, let's build more pipelines, let's build more wires. All of that is absolutely necessary. But the more we do on the energy efficiency side, the fewer turbines, pipelines, and wires we need to build. So efficiency brings investment costs down. It brings immediate benefits to consumers and societies, and it really, here in 2022, in the situation we find ourselves, really merits a strong focus. And of course, Russia's invasion of Ukraine has really just focused minds even further. It's made a lot of us realize the vulnerability we face in terms of our dependence on imports from places we'd rather not import, and of course our vulnerability to costs, and particularly volatile costs. And let's not underestimate how much consumers, not just in Europe but around the world, are really feeling the pain of high prices right now. And it behoves us all to address that as an absolute priority. And of course energy efficiency speaks to all of these questions, whether we're thinking about prices and import dependence in 2022, or whether we're thinking about getting on the path towards our net zero goals over the coming years. An IEA analysis shows very clearly that really efficiency is where we need to start. If efficiency doesn't drive decarbonisation of the energy system in this decade in particular, well then the project will be, if not impossible, certainly more expensive, more difficult and more risky. And that's why efficiency is so important. And then if we think about the scale of what we need to do, in very broad terms, according to our analysis, in the next couple of years, certainly across this decade, our progress on energy efficiency needs to more than double. We are making some progress in different parts of the world. We're building more efficient homes, industry is becoming more efficient, technology is becoming more efficient, but we need to double that pace. And those of you working in the field will realize that's not an easy ask. Efficiency works hard, it brings a lot of benefits, even though sometimes they're not that visible to people. But the prospect of really scaling up, more than doubling our rate of improvement and more than tripling our investment in energy efficiency in the coming years is not an easy ask. And I think there's 2 things we can't ask governments alone to do. One is to find the money that's required for energy efficiency. The scale of investment is well beyond what governments alone can do. And secondly, the implementation task. As we all know here, energy efficiency takes work. It takes capacity building, it takes direct engagement with industry and consumers, it takes detailed analysis of sites, it takes detailed analysis of technologies. And again, government can't provide the workforces directly that are going to be required for that. And that's of course where ESCOs come in. Now, when we look at energy efficiency and we look at the policies that are working, a lot of the best policies in the world around energy efficiency historically have been regulatory. Some of the most impactful policies around the world have been fuel standards for cars, building energy codes, standards for appliances. All of these things have really made a difference. But I think in the next phase of energy efficiency, we're looking at a more complex ask. It's not simply about the most efficient device, though of course that will still be essential, but we're looking at a more project-based approach. We're looking at converting, sites to much higher levels of controlled energy management through digitalization, much higher levels of energy efficiency. And that's where expertise comes in, and that's where, the kind of expertise that ESCOs can provide will be really important. So for me, the day of the ESCO is really coming. When we want to scale up energy efficiency progress that we know we need to, and we know that we can't rely on government alone, that's where ESCOs will really have an opportunity to flourish. But ESCOs can't flourish without the right policies in place. And one thing that I want to stress for this morning's session and for the next couple of days is that the 7th annual conference brings together governments from over 60 countries, more than 20 of them at ministerial level, another 20 at most senior official level. So you really have the people here that need to hear the messages. What can ESCOs do for them, and what do they need to do to empower ESCOs? So that's where our focus is. What are the actions that companies can take? What are the actions that governments can take that can really allow ESCOs to fulfill their potential and really drive the scaling up of energy efficiency that we need to see over the next couple of years and decades. And that's why I'm delighted, Mel and colleagues and Suzanne and Soren, that we've organized this event together, because it's got a focus on action. We're going to hear some real examples from different countries of exactly what has worked, but also maybe a little bit of what hasn't worked. We want to learn from each other, so we want to share experience, and we want everybody to go away with new ideas that they can take home and implement directly. We really want you to go home, and before you've unpacked your suitcase, take some action. Take some action based on what you've heard, what you've learned, and let's really see this as a historical moment here in 2022, where we look back on this conference and say that was the moment that efficiency really stepped up a gear and really started to deliver what we all know is its full potential. So we're delighted you've all joined us in the room, online. We look forward to talking to you over the next couple of days, but we really look forward in particular to this morning's first session, and thank you very much for joining us. Thank you.
Thank you, Brian, and thanks for setting the scene so clearly for what we need to do. And now I'd like to turn to Susanna Pedersen, please, Director of the newly formed Copenhagen Climate Centre.
Thank you very much, dear colleagues, dear panelists, and distinguished guests. It is truly a pleasure for UNEP Copenhagen Climate Centre and the Global ESCO Network to co-organize this event with the International Energy Agency and bring together such knowledgeable experts and promoters of the ESCO model from around the world. I'm Susanne Pedersen, Director of the UNEP Copenhagen Climate Centre. Recently, United Nations Environment Programme, UNEP, announced that its long-standing collaborating center, the UNEP DTU Partnership, has been renamed UNEP Copenhagen Climate Centre. And in effect, we are now part of the UNEP family, and where we help to implement the UNEP's climate change and strategy and energy program. And we are also hosting the Global ESCO Network. As the climate change agenda tightens, we can no longer afford to leave the emissions reduction options and energy efficiency untouched. As pointed out by IEA's Efficient World scenario, energy efficiency could result in reductions of annual energy-related emissions, delivering over 40% of the abatement required to be in line with the Paris Agreement. At COP26, a great momentum was created, and countries presented new climate change mitigation commitments through their nationally determined contributions. In addition, a number of countries, regions, cities, companies have communicated very ambitious net zero pledges and joining the race to net zero. Although this movement clearly reflects a great ambition and commitment from a variety of stakeholders. It's also evident that concrete plans and strategies to achieve these targets are lacking. More than 85% of NDCs under the Paris Agreement mention energy efficiency as a priority. This is great, but very few, and probably less than 10 countries, specify in detail how the efficiency gains are to be achieved. And without plans, chances are that little will be accomplished. To put it bluntly, it's easy to set targets if you expect others to figure out how they will reach them. The required expertise to deliver on the immense mitigation potential through energy efficiency rests in part with ESCOs. As Brian put it eloquently, the day of the ESCOs are coming. Activating the commonly domestic energy efficiency expertise should be a first choice for climate policy developers to implement concrete plans and strategies to achieve net zero targets. The growing urgency of decisive responses to a rapidly worsening climate challenge and the inherent ESCO promise of delivering profitable investments to the same effect mandate a prominent role of the ESCO community in the global climate change agenda. So with these initial welcoming remarks, I wish you all a constructive day with good discussions, cross-fertilization, looking at success factors and financing models to enable ESCOs to deliver on the climate promise for net zero. Thank you very much.
Many thanks, Suzanne. Now I'd like to turn to, Suzanne mentioned that the global ESCO network, and so I'd like to turn to the lead of that network. Søren, the floor's yours.
Ladies and gentlemen, good morning and welcome to this hall, I should mention, which in fact is completely out of context, but we are in a room that I was in 40 years ago during my military time. This was our exercise hall, just mentioning without any relation whatsoever. So also a warm welcome from the Global ESCO Network. We're an organization that was established around 3 years ago as a network of ESCO associations across the world. We have now organized about 85% of those that exist and counting. We are anchored, as Susanne just mentioned, in the UNEP Copenhagen Climate Center, which was born out of the, also as Susanne mentioned, the UNEP DTU partnership, which for 30 years has been supporting UNEP in its climate change agenda. Also there is anchored the Copenhagen Center on Energy Efficiency, so it was a natural place to make the observation that ESCOs seem to be almost completely absent on the climate change agenda. So we thought we had to do something about that. That is contrary to energy efficiency in general, as Susanne also mentioned, that most countries, 85% of countries, consider energy efficiency as an important part of their nationally determined contributions, but very few have actually specific plans on how to implement those goals. So energy efficiency seems to be high on declarations, but rather low on implementation. And it's a shortfall that we can no longer afford. So with the increasing call for implementation, recently also from the Egyptian incoming president of the COP27, we need a change of focus. We need a change of approach. We need a change of modality. And that is where the ESCO, the Energy Service Company, enters. It's a common perception that climate change requires a new technology. Technologies, it's assumed, will ultimately be able to overcome the climate change challenge. ESCOs are not technology. It's not a technology fix. It may be a modality fix. The problem with technology fixes is that they are not focused on implementation. My newsfeed delivers, on average, 5 new technologies every day that could solve a smaller or larger part of the climate change challenge. But it doesn't help much if they're not brought into action. I've been in this business long enough to have my keyboard suggest replication when I push R and scale up when I push S. We have done technology needs assessment in the Copenhagen Climate Change Center for about 15 years. But it doesn't help much if implementation is only considered as an afterthought. In energy efficiency, we have hundreds of viable technologies. IEA has calculated just one of them, a switch to viable speed motors in all applications where motors are used, could cut 10% of global energy consumption. 10%. The strange thing is that we seem not to have learned how to ensure a broad-based implementation of energy efficient technology, how to scale up and replicate. Today's conference will contribute significantly to this learning from countries and institutions that have actually done so. Countries that have overcome regulatory barriers that commonly stand in the way of implementation. We at the Global ESCO Network have mapped such barriers and published an analysis last week. It's up there on the screen. It's also on the table down there, so you can take your copy. We intend to expand and deepen that analysis going forward. Some barriers need to be removed. For instance, some split incentives in the public sector where savings only lead to cutting budgets, or where occupants of buildings do actually not pay the energy bills. That is another entity doing that. Other barriers are found in the lack of regulation, in a hands-off approach by policymakers that seem to assume that the market will take care of it. This could be something as simple as just a definition of ESCOs, or a standard contract, or a government-supported accreditation scheme. Those are easy things to implement, but few are doing it. Or something more ambitious, or not particularly ambitious. Many countries, or not many, but a few countries actually doing these, which could be just the lack of a national mandatory audit scheme with implementation requirements. We know that when Alex is in the room, they have just done so in the Philippines. It could be a financing facility to alleviate risks, including payment risks, or a straightforward clarification of taxation issues. Those are things that government could do, but commonly do not. And then there are well-meaning policymakers that simply get it wrong when they start promoting energy efficiency. And before we start our exciting agenda today, I would like to give you an example. These days in Denmark, we are totally focused on heat pumps as the obvious alternative to gas-fired stoves. We establish government support programs that co-finance heat pumps on a grant basis to accelerate the uptake. No doubt we need that acceleration, but the modality is a panic reaction. The heat pump is part of a system that comprises an entire building, windows and insulation, for instance, included. Among those three, the heat pump is the cash cow. It may have a payback time of, say, 8 years, whereas insulation and windows may be at least double that. Combined, it may be somewhere in the middle, say 11, 12 years. So what does a government grant program do? It finances the part that is already profitable and renders the rest unviable. In fact, we are sugarcoating the cherry and leave the pie untouched. This is clearly not a technology problem. We know the heat pump works. We've been using them for more than a decade, profitably. There's no need to provide a grant for that. So this is a modality problem. Let me share an alternative vision, one that would make sure that these heat pumps are installed without sugarcoating just the cherry. Instead of educating consumers to expect a grant, without which they will now not invest at all, we underpin the ESCO industry with access to sufficient capital to undertake the investments that we want to happen. Deploying one of several ESCO modalities, the consumer only pays through the value of the saved energy and do not need co-financing by the government. In addition, we underpin the market through energy audit requirements, we establish standard contracts, and an accreditation system for ESCOs to secure confidence in the market. And we keep these elements in place until banks have learned that investment in energy efficiency is not a bad business at all. And then we leave the market to do its job, but only then. That is a modality fix. You can leave the choice of technology to the ESCOs. They know better. That's their core business. They will deploy the technology that makes the best cases for them and their clients, while we, at the Global ESCO Network, will disseminate the best practices, which is neither cherry-picking nor sugarcoating the cherries. I'm looking much forward to listen to the different elements of this modality fix today, where the ESCO is central and the support structures are focused on them and not the technology. I wish you a successful conference. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Søren, for those very important words again as we enter this conversation. And we very much want this to be a conversation, so we're really interested in what the outcomes might be, how we can share experience with governments. So that's what we're trying to eke out of this conversation. And so I'd like now to turn to, I think most people who are involved in this business would say the best qualified person to make this next presentation. We're going to hear from Lily Zhao, who used to run the Energy Management Company Association in China, but in doing so, she travelled around the world advising, sharing experience. So she has a unique vision of what's happened over the last 20 years, and she's going to share some of her thoughts about where we should go next in this journey to scale up. So I'm hoping you're with us, Lily.
Yes, I'm ready.
Brilliant. Thank you very much. Lovely to see you.
Thank you. It's really a great honor to be here after my retirement from National Association last year. But I'm really glad to come back to ESCO business, as right now I'm still working on another platform. It's called ESI. You can notice my background is ESI. It's another national alliance, mainly focusing on the development of enterprises. As most of friends has known that I've been working on the ESCO development for about 20 years. So my topic is going to talk about how the association will help the development of ESCOs. I think most of the audience here, or most of the people are here, are quite interested about ESCO business, or some of them are still working as a national association. So we realize that ESCO business is leading by the government policies, as Brian has mentioned. The ESCO will not flourish without policy support. Yes, I totally agree with you. And of course, ESCO is a kind of a business as usual. It's driven by the economic benefits, of course. But ESCO development not only have their economic benefits, but more importantly, they will have some social and environmental benefits will be shared by the public. So I think as a national association, we work as kind of a link or kind of bridge between the government, which represent the common interests of the public, and also the ESCOs. Next, please. Yes. I will define the NGOs or association or alliance or like kind of organization to promote the ESCO development as a bridge or a link or kind of platform, or it's just a window to reflect the common interests of ESCOs, and also to link with the other stakeholders, either the energy users or the investors. Next, please. I think as a platform or as a bridge, this kind of association must be an independent and dedicated association solely for the development of ESCOs. Of course, some of associations are working to promote energy efficiency, but not the development of ESCOs. Or some associations are promoting some kind of technologies, either for industries or buildings or public sectors, but they are not dedicated to ESCOs. So I think as the ESCO association, we should focus only on the development of ESCOs. And so this can help you, to bridge or to think about the ESCO as a whole, to reflect their common interests and to solve their problems. And more importantly, as a national or as an association, it should provide support to ESCOs, including but not limited to the capacity buildings and marketing activities and some other promotional activities. And of course, as a national or a global or even regional association, we also need to educate the market, including the end users and the investors, to overcome some common barriers and to raise some awareness about the ESCOs and about their business models. Next, please. So what shall the association do, or what we can do to promote ESCO business? I think there are lots of things we need to do or we have done. For the government, I think the ESCO association is a link, is a very useful and helpful link with different levels of government, either national or provincial or even municipal levels, to reflect the common interests of ESCOs, to report our problems or difficulties and to raise our demands for policies. And of course, it's also a link with the investors, because there are so many investors are interested on energy efficiency, but they have so many questions and they're worrying about the risks, about their investment return risks or investment return terms, and about the technologies, about the everything. So I think as an association, we can provide common sense, and also we can provide some kind of even capacity buildings for the investors. So we need to educate the investors as well. And the third, and I think the most important one, is information. Yeah, information is still quite a barrier, even though technology are everywhere, and solutions and successful projects, best practice, you can find it everywhere. But for energy users or for investors, sometimes they just don't have a channel, a very professional channel or platform to find this useful informations. And I think as an association, we can provide this kind of useful and successful best practices to the societies. And of course, we need to work with the end users and the third parties who provide some legal and professional services for ESCOs as well. So next slide, please. Yes, we can see we have, ESCO associations everywhere, almost all around the world, in China, Korea, Japan, and even Mexico and South Africa. So all these associations are working very hard towards the development of ESCOs around the world. Next, please. So we found that some very successful practice. Next slide. Yes. Yes, we found some very successful practices around the world, like in China as the National Association of AMCA, and they provide all kinds of activities, including the policy recommendations, marketing activities, capacity buildings. So right now, China has the biggest, I think, the ESCO market in the world. Of course, United States has very successful experience about the accreditation of the ESCOs. They provide some practicals like M&V and trainings as well. And of course, they also provide some financial practicals, which are very useful and supportive for the investors, especially the banks. And for like the Australian associations, they also made some policy recommendations and deliver some trainings. And of course, like Indian and Canada, South Africa, all these associations, they have their own practice, but they are all working towards the development of ESCOs, and they're focusing on the ESCO problems and barriers, and trying to find all the ways to overcome all these barriers and provide all kinds of supports for the ESCOs. Next, please. Of course, we know that the success of ESCO really depends on the market. And of course, the government support is leading the market. But finally, and most importantly, is driven by the economic benefits. Next, please. There are so many barriers on the way of ESCO development. Policy, of course, is the first one, and the awareness raising, including the awareness from the energy users and investors. And the capacity of the ESCOs need to be improved quite urgently. As Brian has mentioned, now it's not just a simple energy efficiency increasement. We need to work out a solution, and the digitalization of energy management, all these kind of systematic solutions for the end users. Next, please. So what shall we do as an association to support ESCO? I think we need to provide the policy recommendation that's the most important, and for most of the countries, as I know. For some other countries like Philippines, they have a national target for energy efficiency. This is very useful and create a market for the ESCOs. Like in Singapore, they also have a national target, and also they have incentives for the energy efficiency. But unfortunately, the financial support is mainly for the users. This is really not so friendly for the ESCOs. So we need to provide quite professional and effective policies for the government, which is helpful for the development of professional ESCOs, not only to raise the energy efficiency, but also to create more social opportunities and to achieve more environmental and social benefits. And of course, lots of marketing activities also need to be provided and delivered, and information dissemination, as the Global ESCO Network has mentioned, that we really need a platform, to provide these kind of useful informations and the capacity building, and also towards the sustainability of the ESCO development. Next, please. Yeah, I would like to focus on the government role to promote ESCOs, as we have very successful practice in China. As somebody mentioned, that China has the most best policies for ESCOs about 10 years ago. Right now, we have already has the best ESCO industries in China. I think the government policies really help to create a supportive ecology for the ESCO industries, because energy efficiency improvement will not only create economic benefits, but more importantly, social and environment benefits, which will be appreciated by the whole society, even the more generations. So I think it is the government's role, government's responsibility to provide some incentive policies for the ESCOs. including the, to set up a national target, which will create the market for ESCOs and provide direct incentives like taxable preference policies and some direct financial award policies, and to make some national programs or national plans like what happened in Thailand and Philippines or these countries. And the second is to regulations. In order to maintain the sustainable development of ESCOs, I think regulation and the national standards are also quite important for the ESCO development. Next, please. So we need a network. A national association is kind of platform, but we need a more broad network or global network. I think right now every country almost have their national associations, whether it is a association or organization or alliance or what kind of name. And also we can have some regional organizations like we have up here Asian Pacific ESCO associations. We're working together with Asian Pacific regions. We share the similar, situations, and we can have more cooperation opportunities. And right now we have the global platform, so we can share globally the energy efficiency and the ESCO and best practice, and share the policies from different countries. And hopefully we can working with other stakeholders, not only ESCOs, but other stakeholders to form a kind of universal alliance working towards a net zero the world. Next one, please. As Brian has mentioned, that really is the ESCO time is coming, and yeah. So I really would like to work with all the people around the world towards a net zero and to promote the ESCO development. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Lily, for sharing your insights and they've this investment of the last 20 years of understanding what's worked and helping others to start this process and then start sharing best practice. It's been a really important basis, I think, for the establishment of the global ESCO network. So that brings our opening session to a close. I'd like to thank Brian, Susanna and Søren, and we'll move into the next panel straight away. Thank you very much. So could I ask Armin, Lydia and Mada to join me now? Thank you very much. And we have another colleague, Galia, who will be joining us online. So in this panel, we've had our scene setter. We've heard about what's been going on over the last 20 years. We've heard about barriers. We've heard about the need. So what we're going to do now is kind of dig into some very specific examples of energy service models. And we're taking a very broad view of ESCO here. So there's a whole range of different types of models, and we're going to try and look at several of them over the course of this morning and understand why they've worked, what's special about them, what would you need to do to be able to scale them. So that's kind of the plan for this session. And we've asked each of our speakers to start with a single slide that kind of epitomizes their ideas, their model, and just take a few minutes to explain those kind of key factors. I think we're going to start with Lydia, if we may.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mel, for the introduction. Yeah, my slide should be up there. I'm here to talk to you a bit of the ESI model, Energy Savings Insurance Model, and its main components. So this ESI model, so we call it a model because it's beyond just an insurance for energy savings, So it has its 4 components. This model was created by BASE with the Inter-American Development Bank with funds from the Danish government back in 2015. The model got the international recognition also from the Climate Innovative Lab for financing solutions. And so the model is composed of those 4 core elements. The first of them, it is the contract, a standardized contract, where the ESCO or the solution provider will guarantee the savings, the future energy savings to their client, typically an SME. So the model was set up for SMEs to make the investments in energy efficiency. They are also the credit takers from the bank, from the financing institutions to make this investment. So with this guarantee in contract, the provider is the first one to respond, but this guarantee is also backed by an insurance. So this is the second element of the model, the energy savings insurance that works as this financial guarantee for the client. So if the savings are not achieved, the provider cannot respond, the insurance will come in to compensate. And to solve most of the technicalities, so it is very often the case that in SMEs, they do not have the personnel to understand the technicalities of energy efficiency. The communication there sometimes is difficult between the ESCO and the client, if the savings were achieved or not, or what are the conditions that those savings are guaranteed. So for this, we brought in this other element that is the technical validation entity. They do an evaluation pre-installation on the project, on the potential of this project to achieve the savings. So it is backing, is validating this guarantee that the ESCO is giving on the technical aspects. It comes in again in the installation of the validation to make sure that what was installed is in accordance to the contract. And the most important role of this technical validation entity is the arbitration role. So in case there are disagreements, so it's many times the case that are disputes, so the ESCO saying, yes, here are your savings, they were achieved. The client coming in and saying, no, they were not. So in case there are disputes, there is this technical validation that works as an arbiter. And it also gives the security to the insurance that if the insurance is claimed, those savings were also verified and tested that they were actually not achieved. So the combination of all those elements makes the decision maker in an SME more comfortable in making the decision for an energy efficiency investment. So there is where, from the experience of BASE of working with many international development agencies and banks, just setting up the financing instruments doesn't mobilize the clients, the SMEs, especially a largely untapped market. They are not lining up, waiting there for the next credit line for energy efficiency investment. So with this model, the idea is to mobilize the demand. So make them very comfortable in making the decision that their future energy savings will be achieved. And just to mention then, is in this ESCO model, the ESCO is then paid full at the delivery of the project. So the payment from the ESCO is not attached to future energy savings. So this is maybe the uniqueness of the model. I'm happy here to have this discussion, to compare and to continue this conversation, because I think there is not one silver bullet for all. We need all the models to make the energy efficiency work.
Yes, if there were, we might have found it by now, but we certainly haven't. You've used this model in various parts of the world. You talked about starting in Latin America, but you've also been working in the European Union, and I think you're starting to do some work in Asia. Can you just give us some compare and contrast? What is it that makes this work everywhere? What needs adapting? Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, actually, all the elements need adapting to the local context. As a standardized contract, it needs to be in compliance with the local regulation. And what we've seen around the world, the insurance element is also something to be looked at in each of the countries, because this type of insurance is not the classical risk coverage insurance. It's more of a financial instrument. We have been working in the different countries with the local insurance companies, because many times they are not used to seeing this type of application of this product, this surety product, in energy efficiency. So they are very much risk averse, like it's expected from an insurance company. So
business.
yeah. So this is much of the work that we do to show them that it's a coverage of a contractual agreement, and yeah, and I think to keep it short.
Thank you. We'll come back to that if we can, if we have time. And I'd like to turn to Armin next, please. And same points. You know, what is it about the model that ESCO in a Box has that's special? What makes it work? And you know, how adaptable is it?
Sure. Thanks, Mel. Hi, everyone. Glad to be here. So the model that I'm going to talk about is actually quite similar in some ways to the ESI model that Olivia's just outlined. Maybe just a few words on the background of this. The notion for ESCO in a Box was developed in the UK by colleagues of mine at a company called Energy Pro, now EP Group, with funding support from the UK government several years ago, and we piloted the first ESCO of this kind in Oxfordshire with a new entity that was developed there known as Energy Solutions Oxfordshire. Essentially, the idea was to target a market that sits between what larger energy service companies like Johnson Controls or Schneider Electric, Siemens don't really bother with, smaller project sizes, and between also then very small projects, things that M&E contractors carry out, you know, single replacements of boilers or one-off solar PV installations. So projects that sit in a kind of sweet spot that might be delivered in contexts such as trading parks or SME sites, business retail parks, schools potentially. And to enable this kind of these kind of projects to get off the ground, you need some level of standardization, you need a toolkit, a place to start. So ESCO in a Box contains a number of the elements also that are contained in ESI in terms of standardized contracts. We have financial or investment partners, also technology partners that like to try and bid into these projects. There's also a softer side of this in terms of having a marketing package involved. We have a CRM software tool that we provide to partner ESCOs. And the idea is to create a kind of operating model for a small ESCO to work with and kind of a place to get started from. So as you can see at the bottom, we have these licensees. So it is a franchise model whereby, our company, our small consultancy is the licensor, and we collect license fees and project fees. They aren't huge, to be honest. The idea is more to create scale and replication, echoing very much on Søren's points from earlier. And we've had a lot of interest. So started in the UK, and we're still very active in the UK. I'm just going to jump over to the Greater Birmingham and Solihull example there. That's a local enterprise partnership, which is something that is very prevalent across the UK. You have them across many counties, and they are ways for that particular local or regional authority to make some progress, not just on energy, but other enterprise areas. And we're working with them to create a regional model for an ESCO, helping them with guidance documents, templates, and just a strategic go-to-market approach there, early stages. But we have agreed an ESCO, a licensee there. We've also had interest from the United States. We have a small sort of project happening in New Jersey through New World Energy. And they're very active in the MUSH market, the municipal and hospitals market there. And our model has helped them to gain some new project opportunities. Innovators is actually Kenya. We're working with a fantastic organization there called Innovators with some funding support from the GIZ to develop an ESCO in Kenya that's focused very much also on youth, gender equality, and their market focus is energy-intensive horticulture and agricultural solutions. And just finally, we have some very promising initial conversations going on in terms of the Philippines with funding support from UNOPS and the local partner Climb Capital based in Singapore, who are helping us to connect with energy companies in the Philippines who are looking to start up an ESCO like this. So early days on that one, but we're very, very hopeful that will progress quite quickly.
What would you say was special about this? Why are people interested in this, whereas they haven't necessarily been interested in other ESCO models? What is it that you're doing that's creating this interest?
It's all in the name, really. It's a great name.
It's ESCO in a box. It's a very good name. I have to agree. Yeah.
I think that I mentioned it before. It's a place to start.
Yeah.
It's a place to stop boiling the ocean, so we can come in and help just structure a few things, and even things like branding, marketing, having a CRM tool that people can get started with, I think is very helpful, and just having that notion that there's a network out there of best practice that they can plug into, I think is also very compelling.
Right, and coming from the IEA, you won't be surprised if I ask you this, but could you just explain a little what the role of data is in your model?
Sure. I mean, in a way, it's not as big a role as it would be in larger ESCO projects. We have a lot of commercial buildings or very complex operations, but we do need, of course, baseline data is very critical. So we need to make sure, and it's reflecting on some of the points you made around the technical validation and making sure there's no disagreements at the end. And this is actually, it seems to come up often that at the end of the day, the client may not agree with the ESCO in terms of what was delivered, in terms of the savings level. Were there operational changes in the building? Can we kind of go back and just do some analysis to see what actually happened? So the baseline data is key, and it's not always there. So that's one thing where the data is critical, not just in this segment, but I also work with a lot of corporate real estate clients, and the same issue is there. They're setting net zero targets, but they're not quite sure what the baseline is because they don't have enough historical data. So perhaps some government support there, or even just some guidelines, standards, best practice could be useful to make sure that we get at least to the baseline. Once you have the baseline in place and you have visibility on the operations for a single year, for example, for 12 months, you have some meter data, I think the MNV part at the end should be straightforward, especially in smaller projects.
And do you think there are benefits in standardizing that process so you've got comparable data? Is there a role for an organization like yours in helping a range of networks, say, in a country, so that there's a standard practice? Does that help at all?
Sure.
Does it not matter?
I think that there's some Basel principles for good data. I think there's sort of 12 data governance principles that could also be applied. So there's some international principles on just data governance that could be used and standardized across the industry to help organizations.
Okay. Brilliant. Thank you. Good. So we're going to go next, as long as she's with us, to Galia, who I hope is connecting via Zoom. Are you there, Galia?
Yes, hello.
Hello. Welcome.
Good morning, everybody. Thank you.
Feel free to go ahead.
Okay, thank you for the invitation first to participate in that event. As an executive director of the Energy Efficiency and Renewable Sources Fund, I would like to share our experience in the ESCO market. Some words about the Energy Efficiency and Renewable Sources Fund. It was established through the Energy Efficiency Act, adopted by the Bulgarian Parliament in February 2004, and with the technical assistance provided under a World Bank project. The initial capitalization of the Energy Efficiency and Renewable Sources Fund is entirely with grant funds from the major donor, Global Environment Facility, through the World Bank, the government of Austria, the government of Bulgaria, and some private Bulgarian companies. The Energy Efficiency and Renewable Sources Fund is structured as an independent legal entity that concentrates its efforts on facilitating energy efficiency investment and on promoting the development of a working energy efficiency market in Bulgaria. On the slide, you can see our three models of energy services companies, which the Energy Fund financing. First of all is some direct financing of ESCO companies with guaranteed result or not. Second, purchase of receivables through cession contract or debt purchase. And the third, ESCO portfolio guarantees. So I would like to explain some in details in purchase of receivables. Purchase of receivables or the cession contract provided to be the most successful or popular on the Bulgarian market method. Through the conclusions of assignment contracts, the fund in the role and the assignee finance the ESCO contractor, the assigner, for a project to increase energy efficiency and some renewable energy sources. The model works as follows. After a public procurement procedure for the selection of the ESCO contractor and the conclusions of performance a contract between the company and the respectively beneficiary of the project, the assigner, by concluding an assignment contract, sells to the assignee its receivables arising under the performance contract up to the amount of the project value financed by the fund. The payment of the installments under the assignment agreement shall be made by the debtor of the assigned receivables, and in the event of non-payment by the debtor of the assigned receivables, the assigner shall guarantee the payment of the outstanding contractual obligation owed to Energy Efficiency and Renewable Resources Fund. This requirement is also imposed in relation to the guaranteed outcome provisions of the contract, namely that the ESCO contractor guarantees that the savings achieved will be sufficient to repay the project. In the event of savings below those guaranteed, the ESCO contractor is obliged to make up the difference, so the contributions to the fund are made evenly in accordance with the agreed repayment plan. Since 2006, the Energy Efficiency Fund has supported 70 projects in buildings, enterprises, and street lighting in municipalities, with amount about 9 million level or amount $10 million euros, that the portion of the fund. And I would like to say something about the ESCO portfolio guarantees. This model launched on the initiative of the World Bank as a financial instrument in 2008. ESCO portfolio guarantees aim to attract more ESCO companies into this business and to make ESCOs more comfortable by guaranteeing the risk of their counterparties, the project beneficiaries. And on the scheme, the following figure shows the scheme under which portfolio guarantees for energy service companies are implemented. Normally, ESCOs would bid for a project and then go to a bank to secure finance for it, or have a line of financing ready and fill it with some projects. The shortcoming of this approach is that typical ESCOs rely heavily on raising debt to fund their performance contracts. This requires that the cash flow of their business is very accurately timed and budgeted. Delayed payment for clients or defaulting clients may severely disrupt the servicing on the debts of the ESCO itself. With our ESCO portfolio guarantee, we undertake some of the risk of the ESCO and guarantee that we will cover such disruption in the flow of receivables of the ESCO. Statistically, the default rate of clients of ESCOs is negligible, so that 5% cover of the guarantee is more than sufficient. Delays in payment are more probable, and in such cases, the fund will act as a financial buffer to take the shocks. On the other hand, such product provides an excellent leverage of the fund's own funds. For example, 500,000 level or 250,000 euro guarantee will facilitate the portfolio of investment in the amount of about 5 million euro. So the Energy Efficiency and Renewable Sources Fund has supported 29 ESCO guarantees over the years, with the total value of the projects about 70 million level, or the fund share the total value of credits of about 600,000 levels. So in our opinion, the purchase of receivables is more successful model compared to portfolio guarantees.
Thank you, Galia. Have you got any insights you'd like to share, given you've got slightly varying models? Any insights about how you think this could be adapted to work in other countries? Is it something that you think could work as it is, or there are elements of it that are more will require more work?
It's difficult to say how is it work in other countries, but in the Bulgarian market, I think purchase of receivables is more comfortable. Is the success model.
Okay, thank you very much. So we've heard from 3 large kind of programs that have been aid funded on the whole, and have a portfolio of projects, all based on a great idea. We're going to turn now to somebody who has taken the interest and the experience and information that's been provided globally and established her own ESCO. So, Madam, would you like to tell us a bit about your experience?
Okay, thank you, Mel. Morning, everybody. So my company here is Enertech Mitra Solusi. We are from Jakarta, Indonesia. So maybe I a little bit want to share my experience during the ESCO. So we start, my company start to have a contract in 2014. We start with replacing from the bulb, the conventional bulb into the LED. So at that moment, we have a very simple model. We replace all the bulb in the building. At that moment is around 10,000 bulbs, and replaces into the LED. In 2014, LED is not something usual in Indonesia, so it's saving up to like 60% saving from the previous billing consumption. So first, when we create to do the project, is we send the energy auditor. I hire a consultant for that. So we came to the baseline where we can agree to the client which number or savings that we can agree to another contract. We have a contract around like 3 years at that moment, and amazingly, the saving is quite huge. So the client's very happy with the project. Yes, like Olivia said, and other colleague who said it before, that putting the agreement to the number that we save is very crucial, because in that case we can less dispute with the client. So how to secure the payment is we ask the contract for like 3 years, like I said, and they provide us like a backdated check. So we have a same number monthly basis, the savings. And for example, if my invoice is first of a week of a month, and we have to submit the backdated checks like a week before. So in the date time that they will send the money to my account, and it works until the contract is finished, and after that I transfer all the equipment to the client. That's our first project. But I saw that we don't have any, like, if you want to like scale up the project, it will be very hard to get the investor if only using a very like a simple kind of find the investor and invest in the project. Because the problem is a lot of investor didn't know what is kind of project in energy efficiency. So sometimes they ask how to get the security of payment, and how to, if the client is like, we call it like they will pay like delayed payment or something like that, how we secure the investment on the equipment that we already installed in the buildings. So in 2018, I have another project also. Now we replace from the conventional, what is that, chiller into using the new technologies. So I think the technology is one of the important issue also, because at that moment we can save, and we do also remotely system a chiller. So if the client doesn't want to pay us, or maybe we put it in like a delay payment, so we can turn off the chiller remotely. And I think that one can be a significant for a client to, yeah, they are afraid if they they are afraid if they get a delay payment or something like that. So yeah, but at the moment, one of a bank wants to finance through my partner. But the bank also asks, what is our collateral? For one project, maybe it can be like happen. But if we want to scale up the project, it will be very hard for us to provide all the collateral in every project. So that's why now I shifted we try to change another model of scheme to the client, so that the investor feels secure to invest on this project. So if you see on my chart, this is my previous on the red one, and now we get a new business model scheme that we offer to the commercial building, one in Bali. And thank you to UCAPEC from British government, and also from UNOPS, who grant us to do the project implementation for implementing the ESI project. So in this new scheme, we provide to the client, if and also to the investor, if they want to invest to this kind of project, there is insurance, one insurance in Indonesia who wants to cover the risk of the payment, and also the risk of the technology itself. So, for example, if we said the risk of technology, if there is a failure of the performance of the equipment itself, the insurance will come to cover all the what is that? Maybe the failure of the for not saving the energy as per we committed to the client. And then second, if we said about the risk of the payment, a lot of clients want to delay their payment. So if we can get a tolerate, like maybe 1 or 2 months they get a delay, so the insurance will come. I think this is kind of a model maybe that we can scale up the project in Indonesia. Thank you, Mel.
Thank you very much. And you've shown that you've gone through an evolution, so you've clearly learned what's worked and what's not worked so well. But I'm intrigued by the technique by which you're able to control equipment remotely and therefore turn it off. Well, we've seen that with access projects for renewables in the past, but not so much with energy efficiency. But there's no reason why that shouldn't work. Do you find that clients, are enough people going to enter into a contract like that if you can remotely, remove the service?
Yes.
They're not worried about the contract.
No. Yeah, that's why we want to implement this, because the client is agree. Yeah, because I said to them, the problem of the building manager is, or the owner of the building, once you finish the contract or the construction, I mean, they don't have any capex for the new investment. So I told them that I came here, bring the investment, but in reverse that you have to pay us, in like monthly basis. And
so it becomes a revenue payment rather than
yes, that's right, and they are agree with that.
Interesting.
Yeah,
very interesting. So I'd like to spend just a few minutes going round again. So what have you heard this morning that you find most intriguing that you'd like to follow up on?
Actually, there were a couple of
Yeah.
points
Feel free.
that I saw many synergies, like with the ESCO in a box. Actually, base was also there in the initial conception of the model. So there are some of the ESI elements, and then I see the ESI elements also showing up in Mada's new business model, and yeah, I think the interlinkage with the financing institutions is very important. So bringing them on board, and I think the contribution from our colleague online was also very important in that. And one thing that I wanted to add also regarding the data and the information and to the financing aspect of it. So the ESI model also, we set up a management information system also to track the not only the process itself with the approvals and acceptance and installation, but then also the monitoring part, where I think it is very important to keep track record of that. Not only the baseline, what happened, but then also the savings being achieved. And in the ESI model, we embedded that in a management information system. And the ESCO will have the interest in reporting the savings there. Hopefully with digitalizations, we can leapfrog that part, that manual part, that here are your savings reporting every year. But then by generating those savings reports, the liability towards the insurance is also reducing. So there is the strong incentive for the reporting. And we see how this data is becoming more and more, this information is becoming more and more relevant for the current broader net zero scenario. So maybe even linking to the presentation from the introductory panels. Towards net zero. So it is very important. We see with the work based does with the financing institutions, they will want to know how much was saved. So it's not only was the payment achieved, or is the ESCO receiving the payment, is the client compliant with the payment obligations, but also what are the savings being achieved. So this data, this information is becoming more and more relevant, and I think once we share this conversation with other actors. So here we are in an event where we are all interested in the ESCO models, or we are all interested in energy efficiency. But one great opportunity that the ESI brings is to bring these other actors like the insurance company to the dialogue, and the financial institutions as well. So I think data can connect us all. So it is very important that this is also brought forward with energy efficiency.
Great. And that management information system that you're using, are you finding that everybody can use it? It's adaptable to each client. You found a generic model that works?
Yeah, so actually in each ESI implementation we had a little adaptation of it. So the core concept of it is the same. The last thing I heard from the IDB that they were kind of centralizing or setting it up for whole Latin America, and yeah, so it is then a system where the client can see the monitoring reportings there, can approve the monitoring reports, and it is the provider then feeding in the information, and yeah, the access could then, like the extraction of those reports can then be handed to the financing institutions or even the insurance if they are interested. Yeah.
Great. I think these digitalization will change how ESCOs work, and Søren and I have been talking about this quite a lot. This could be the paradigm change that we need in order to scale up. So it's interesting to see those evolving examples. Armin, of what you've heard today, is there anything that you want to go home and talk to the team about? Anything that's piqued your interest that you think you could use to develop your model?
I think certainly we want to circle back with Livia and the team as well, just because I think there's a lot of good synergies there to understand. I'd like to understand more as well about the model that you've built in Jakarta, and it sounds very much that you're, up against the realities of the market and working with real clients, quote unquote, and what that looks like, because I think sometimes we tend to get a bit too theoretical, and it's important to stay grounded and look at what really works out there in the markets.
Yeah. And would you, Galia, is there anything that you want to take away and talk to people about or think more about that you've heard today? Anything new?
So, I would like to talk about some strategies we have to successful in overcoming challenges, because there are a lot of challenges to design a successful ESCO model. As I told you in the slide, we have already mentioned purchase of receivables as our successful model, and the fund is important. Savings to be achieved and repayment done. The fund may receive its receivables with certain delay or might not receive them. And to overcome the challenges we made some improvements of the model. We included in the contract some clauses to protect the fund and its receivables of ESCO company became joint the several debtor to the end of the repayment period as a company and as individual. It's very important for us. Our main strategy is to actively develop the ESCO market. Supporting more ESCO projects is one of the way to minimize the financial risk of the fund. In this case, ESCO is responsible for its technical, financial, and managerial expertise. And in our regulation, something changed in March 2021. In accordance with the latest amendments in the Energy Efficiency Act, an ESCO company is allowed to implement the project from A to Z. That means from the energy audit through the details project design, construction, and consumption and commissioning to achieve the guaranteed result. This creates a strong motivation for the potential ESCO company to carry out the project in the best way. For the portfolio guarantees, our second model, there is no risk of incomplete construction process because the project have already been implemented and put into operation. But in order for such a scheme to be financing, it is necessary to have a portfolio operator with a pipeline of ESCO projects who will serve as an aggregator for a group of projects. But at the present, there is no aggregator of ESCO borrowing for which portfolio guarantees can be issued. So these are our challenges.
Thanks, Galia. And if you had one piece of advice you wanted to give to governments in terms of how to create the right policy environment for ESCOs to thrive, what would it be?
Let me see. As a recommendation, maybe to support the ESCO market, it's important governments to ensure that in the budgets of contracting authorities, state institutions, municipalities, and other announcing an EPC public procurement, there are funds planned and provided, which for the term of the EP contract implementation correspondent to the normalized energy consumption of the buildings, street lighting system or other. Other recommendations based on the barriers faced, it's a huge resources available in the form of grants under the European operational programs or other international funds and institutions have had an extremely negative impact on the development of the ESCO market in Bulgaria.
Thank you. So
Thank you.
Somewhat not to do as well as somewhat to do, which is always very, very interesting, of course. And Mada, you're trying to make this business work. You're part of that movement to scale up. So What would you ask, in your context of the Indonesian government, what do you want them to do that could help businesses like yours thrive?
Yeah, I think for like small medium enterprise like my company, what we need is actually strong regulation from our government, because I already talked to like a financial institution, for example. They are for them is energy efficiency is like a new animal. So they are very afraid to invest on this kind of
It might
project.
bite.
Yeah, because they like for everybody said about like renewable, renewable, and renewable, and nobody said like energy efficiency. And especially there is one regulation: if you trespass the property of the client, you can get by the police, something like that. So they are afraid if the client doesn't want to pay the equipment, we cannot take out the equipment because it's already installed in the property, right? That's why the financial institution, insurance agency also have to be give the information that actually the business is real and low-hanging fruit. I think why we have to regulate this kind of energy efficiency to scale up the project itself. I think what we all need from the SME, because it's very hard for us to have a collateral like a big one. For example, now I have a pipeline project for $10 million US, but it's very hard to get the investment. Thank you.
So are you mainly trying to work with the private sector, or are you working also with the public sector in Indonesia?
Yeah. No, all the investor is the private sector. And I work for the commercial building at this moment, so office building, mall, hotel. That's my client, but I choose like very limited kind of client. For example, state-owned company, and then public listed company and multinational company. That's all my client. So I think if we talk about if we are afraid they cannot pay, maybe it won't happen. But the problem is how to define the what is that? As we know that ESCO is like a shared saving and performance saving. So how we define it using the digitalization and other thing, it's maybe important also in this kind of business.
So there's obviously a lot of need for energy efficiency in Indonesia in the public sector too, so in municipalities and in government buildings and things, in providing water services and street lighting and things.
Yeah.
What would it take to be able to have an ESCO model that worked with that sector too?
For a government project, I think there is a regulation that the project cannot be multi-years, but it is impossible for not carrying it into multi-years. So I think we have to make a revision on that regulation first. So I think it can be applied.
Okay,
Yeah.
so that's the biggest barrier to that investment.
Sure.
Okay, that's very interesting. Armin, have you got a single piece of advice that you would give governments based on your experience?
Well, maybe I wanted to echo some of the things that Søren had mentioned in the opening remarks regarding the cherry picking, and I see it as well a lot in the corporate real estate environment, whereby you have net zero strategies put in place, and then when it comes to scope 1 and 2 emissions in the buildings, there's lots of low cost, no cost measures. Everything has to be under a 2-year payback, and the reality is we're talking about 10 to 15-year paybacks here to actually achieve, especially credible net zero reductions, unless everything else is offsets and renewable energy certificates. And so governments, I think they need to take it seriously, and they need to understand there is a market failure happening otherwise, and there needs to be intervention. In our experience, it takes about 3 years for an ESCO to break even and become profitable, and in that, there's that valley of death comparison. Some working capital is needed, guaranteed funds, super ESCO models, and it's not unsolvable. It just needs focus and attention, I would say.
And what do you think digitalization could bring to this?
I think, well, I want to caution that it may not actually be a silver bullet, but it can certainly help a lot. And if it works, it's great. You know, if you've got the meters and if you have the data going into very viable systems and they're talking to each other, and they can be understood by policymakers as well as and customers and CFOs as well, who will just want to see a dashboard and want to understand, okay, what's this telling me actually? If that's all in place, it's great, but I'm not sure that we should wait for that to be in place to act, if that makes sense. I think we can act with other information available, and hopefully all the digital tools will come, because they are great. So, yeah.
Okay, thank you. Is Teslim here? Hi there. Teslim, I just wanted to ask you very briefly if you would like to just give us some reflections from what you've heard here and what you're trying to do in South Africa. Teslim's at the back there. Because you're very, South Africa's quite new to this, but you're listening to these conversations. What of it do you think you can take away and use?
Okay, thank you very much, Mel. It's been very interesting listening to all the speakers. And what I noticed is if you look at everything they've been presenting, I mean, it's virtually the same thing with the insurance, the clients, the financiers, and all of that. South Africa is quite unique as well. A lot of these things are also happening in South Africa. But something that comes out very clear to me is we forget that the client is still the main person here. The main person is not government policy. It's not the banks. It's not the technology. It's still the client. And when you look at all the models I've seen, they're quite complex. It looks like it's just a business transaction. You're trying to get the banks to make some money, get the ESCOs to survive, but the client needs to really be the one to go on the journey with the savings. And we have to position our models to ensure that there is guaranteed savings for the client over the long time. And if that savings is not there, everyone ticks their boxes and leaves, then he's never going to go back into such an investment. Equally, I think it was, I think maybe Indonesia you were talking about. There's beginning to become a marriage between energy efficiency and renewables. You almost cannot go down the path of one of them without the other. So we have to help the clients to see the value in the two distinct areas because they're very connected when we talk about net zero. So I think those things came out very clear to me. Then there's also the need for the independence of verification, like your measurement and verification. You cannot have an ESCO go out and do the audits, do the implementation, guarantee the savings, verify the savings exist. Only one person across that value chain. The client cannot trust such a system. So I think you need to have independence across the value chain that someone can come in and check and see your savings are still there. Because the client has his core business. His core business is not energy efficiency or renewables. There has to be someone that comes in as a core business to be able to do that. And that's where government comes in with policy, regulation, standardization. Everything we're saying here is connected. And I can see that I think we're going to strike gold very soon, but not a silver bullet. Thank you.
The golden one instead. Thank you, Teslim. That's great insights. So we're about to, we need to draw to an end, but I think I like the way that the symmetry between what Teslim's just said and what Lily said when she set the scene for us this morning. So she basically pointed out that one of the under talked about things here was the information, and that's the information to potential clients about how these models work and how they can interact and benefit. So I think that was a very strong valorization of that comment too, and also, as you say, the whole system of having accredited ESCOs, accredited auditors, so seeing the strong role for government in all of that. So I'm going to draw this first panel to a close. Thank everybody for their insights. I found this conversation extremely interesting. I hope you have too. And we'll build on it in the next panel. But now we get to take a 15-minute tea break. So thank you, everybody. I'd just like to briefly introduce your moderator for this session. Carla from BASE has kindly agreed to look after this. And we're very grateful to her to partner with with us on this, along with our colleagues, of course, from the ESCO network. So, Carla, over to you.
Thank you, Mel, and welcome everyone. I hope that everyone has already had like a nice coffee, water or something, and we have full of energy to sit down and listen to this new sort of panel discussion in which we are hopefully me plus 6. We're still waiting for someone to join us, so we will be sort of like adding him up whenever he has the chance to arrive. Some issues, usually some logistical issues that happen operational, you know, plane suitcases and stuff like that. And then we have hopefully also 2 persons connected online. Okay, so what I want to do, I'm going to give like a brief intro to sort of the panel. Then I'm going to introduce each one of the speakers, and at the time that I introduce you, I'm going to go one by one. I'm going to ask you to maybe present like for 3 minutes again, like the program or initiative that your organization is supporting. In the case, we do have some slides for most of you. So if by any chance, because of these last minute changes, we may, like if the wrong slide is there, I'm going to ask the tech team to change it. So thank you, tech team, for this. And we can go ahead. So thank you all. First is like, I would really like to thank you, the International Energy Agency, to put this thing together, the conference, and also this really important discussion, because as we know, like energy efficiency is not something like an add-on, it's a must. There are a lot of reasons why. It's not just like the current reason, like the current situation with the war and the need of like we need to reduce our dependency on oil. And there are a lot of ways of doing that. Renewables, of course, is the most well-known, but efficiency it is as well. But it's the fact that if we are talking about net zero, energy efficiency is a must in that equation, okay? And the different calculation could be 30, 35, 40 above. That could come just from energy efficiency. And that's extremely important. And we need to start thinking, how do we put the different actors that have a role in the energy efficiency world, in the market, to collaborate so at the end of the day, things happen. And things happen not just once or twice, at a scale, and they can be replicated, okay? So for that, we clearly know that the public sector has a role. There's a lot of discussion about that. And one of the elements, of course, is public money. But public money is not enough. We need to bring in the private sector. And that's when we need to start talking, okay, what do we do? How do we engage that private sector? What are the drivers? Like, and we know that risk is a key element. So how do we start thinking on the risk in this kind of like investments? Okay. As I said before, who has to be involved? It's not just having one company offering a technology is more efficient, and because of that, a client is going to buy the company. We know there's going to be sort of facilitators. We know there needs to be also the providers, the ones who do the maintenance, the ones who finance the things, the one who ensures this whole project. Okay. And then, what kind of instruments are needed in this case? We saw in the previous panel some really interesting sort of like ideas, and all of them, we were lucky to know that they're operational and they're having an impact. But how can we make that impact be bigger? We know there are several sort of like challenges ahead. First of all, is the fact that energy efficiency, we turn to think whenever something needs to happen, we want to fish those big fishes, because it's, oh, we can do big investments. But in the case of energy efficiency, it's a very fragmented market. There are a lot of little projects that we need to put together at the end to have a real impact. Then another thing, someone mentioned before, energy efficiency is not the core business of the clients. They are the ones who at the end are going to be like benefiting from this efficiency. So how do we increase that demand? How do we make something appealing for someone that this thing is not part of the core business? If I'm a hotel owner, for instance, and I have some money to invest, I may prefer to, I don't know, make a bigger swimming pool, because that's going to attract more clients than changing the air conditionings that are more efficient. So how do I do that? That's another really key element. And then is like, what about the credit worthiness? We saw the case before. Mala, you mentioned like you have 10 million pipeline of projects in Indonesia. and you're not getting the financing for that, and why is that? Is it not necessarily, I'm not saying anything against you, on the contrary, I really congratulate the work you've done, but it's the creditworthiness of the ESCOs, it's the creditworthiness of the final clients, etc. How do we address that? So for that, I really want to welcome all of you. It's a pleasure to have you here. I'm really enjoying this opportunity. I'm going to be learning a lot from hearing from you. So I would like to start in this case by introducing Jalil. Jalil, if I pronounce his surname wrong, please excuse me ahead of time. Chapchup.
Right.
Okay, perfect.
Yes.
So he's the Chief Investment Officer at the African Development Bank. And with that, instead of doing a long introduction, I think we would jump straight ahead into you. I want to understand, like, which is the program or initiative that, in this case, the African Development Bank and you with your expertise are supporting.
Okay, thank you so much, Carla, and thank you for the invitation. I'm pleased to be here today to share with you also our work at the African Development Bank and how we are trying to resolve the problems related to the ESCO market and on the energy efficiency side, especially, as you know, the African countries, unfortunately, it is also the case of other countries around the world. The energy efficiency, it's not a priority. And I've been involved in the energy efficiency for more than 30 years. And I started working on the first ESCO in North Africa, now more than 22 years, in 1999. But unfortunately, up to date, we do not have a market. So the problem is persisting more than 20 years. But why? If I can step back, just to ask the questions, what we need to have a successful market? Well, in fact, we need to have an offer and demand, as simple as that. And on the demand side, this is where we have to work, at least from the African Development Bank, this is where we are focusing now to create this demand. And it should be demand-driven, the energy efficiency, including the ESCOs. So we have to understand why the market fails. And it is done for many years, and this is what you said also this morning about capacity building, about financing, about also having the policies inside. But this is what has been done for many decades. But why we don't have an ESCO? Because we have to think differently, and this is, I think, important. And it was indicated this morning by Søren that we need to review our model or change the modalities. And I think forgetting about specific projects, forgetting about specific barriers, let's take the whole approach. We need to tackle the problem on the holistic approach, to bring in place a model that will tackle almost most of the energy efficiency barriers, which we think important from our side. It's to develop programs, implementing programs, because this is the missing part. If we implement programs, we will resolve at the same time all the problems related to the financing, capacity buildings, but we need to define a program. And the African Development Bank, we are working on supporting the development of the super ESCOs, where we think we will make real changes in the African context, especially in developing countries, where we will have thousands of projects, including schools, hospitals, all the government facilities. So it's not it's a pipeline of projects where we have thousands projects. And based on the international experience, just to name few, the Federal Energy Management Program, the Federal Building Initiative in Canada, the ESL, it had ESCOs. The super ESCO need to be backed by the government. And if we will give the ESCO or the private sector the capacity to experience, to gain experience in this low-risk project, with finding also and putting in place all the needed pillars for a good implementation of the project, then I'm quite sure this will change the scenery, the general, and we will have a good energy efficiency market. And this is where all the implementation, it will be done by the private sector. And I am sure in this way, the private sector will drive more and more. When gaining experience in the government sectors, they will naturally go to the commercial and industrial sector. And this is where we are betting today, and we are supporting some of the countries. Just to complete, we are we are happy to say that we started the implementation of the first Super ESCO in Morocco, in Rabat. We are working also with KPLC in Kenya, to have another model, utility-based Super ESCO, but also pursuing other opportunities in Senegal, Cote d'Ivoire, Burkina Faso, and even on Egypt, and also in potential South Africa for the implementation of the Super ESCO. So this is our vision and our model, and we'll share a little bit later.
Yeah, I'm gonna
keep
that. I'm gonna ask you more about the Super ESCOs later on.
Good.
And as a second panelist, I would like to introduce Fred. Are you there? He's supposed to be connected from Canada. Let's see.
I'm here.
Excellent. Okay, can you just say hi again, just to check? Perfect. So
Good
I would
morning.
like to just welcome Frederic Betes. He's the Managing Director Investments at the Canada Infrastructure Bank. He's the leading the bank's commercial building retrofit initiative. And Fred, welcome. I know, and for everyone to know, he's really, like, I think it's 3 o'clock in the morning Canadian time. So thank you for this effort. And again, I would like you, if you could really give us a brief of this initiative of the Bank of Canada. Thank you.
Thank you. So it's a great opportunity here to present what we're doing in Canada. We started this initiative a year ago now. It's called the Commercial Building Retrofits Initiative. It is a loan program to finance retrofit projects, or deep retrofit projects. The objectives of the program were, and still are, to reduce greenhouse gas emissions in existing buildings. So we don't do new buildings, just the existing ones. We also are trying to transform the market and create lasting change and create an asset class. So we've talked a lot about bringing in private sector financing. And so the bank's mandate is to crowd in private capital into the market and try to create a self-sustaining financial market in that sector. And I'll explain a little later through the Q&A how we do this. We also have an objective here of creating and supporting economic benefits and social co-benefits as affordable housing and quality of life. Our initiative is designed to invest $2 to $3 billion Canadian by the end of 2026. The original version was $2 billion by 2023, and we've had an extra $1 billion to the program. Up to now, we've committed $600 million over 6 different borrowers, such as our first investment in a super ESCO called Sofiac, based in Quebec and Canada, and which we can talk about in more detail. The type of project or loan product that we provide can be senior debt or subordinated debt. We are quite flexible in the type of loans that we make, and the type of risk that we can take with the clients. We can take different levels of credit risk and performance risk with our clients through different sectors of the economy and the real estate world. We make investments of $25 million minimum, which is very large for a retrofit. But what we do is we finance super ESCOs, ESCOs, and large building owners who themselves then go on to finance smaller retrofit projects that could be as small as they want, frankly, as long as they have the ability to manage them. So this is our way of addressing a highly fragmented market through large investments into aggregators, we call them, or building owners or super ESCOs that can then disseminate that capital through the market. We provide one of the benefits, or some of the benefits that we provide in being a financial institutions. We try to provide the high leverage, long tenor of our loan, low interest rate, and even a sliding scale, decreasing interest rate depending on the depth of retrofit. So we can encourage our aggregators to retrofit buildings towards a net zero target for 2030 and beyond. We have 3 different ways of delivering this financing. One is to finance super ESCOs, or what we call aggregators, where we create new investment vehicles led by ESCOs or by financial investors or other promoters. And by putting our financing in that vehicle, we can then deploy the capital, as I said earlier, to multiple smaller projects we let the aggregators decide which market they want to attack or address. So residential or industrial or commercial, or whichever they want, in whichever province of the country that they want, and what size of project that they want. So we let the private sector decide what their business model is, and we provide the supporting financing. We also provide corporate loans to building owners. So there's a lot of real estate trusts in Canada that own large portfolios of buildings. And so we provide subordinated or unsecured senior loans to them so that they can go and retrofit their own building. And we are developing a new approach in partnership with banks so that they can address their own existing and new portfolio of real estate and attract a portion of our financing with them to refinance or finance the real estate portfolio and promote renovations, retrofit, and with the CIB, deeper retrofit into the market. All these three different models are means for us to try to solve one of the many problems with deep retrofit, which is the fragmentation and origination of transaction across a very fragmented and wide and large real estate market. So those are the high-level points, and happy to answer questions after that.
Excellent. Thank you, Fred. With that, I would like to turn into Alexandra Blasa, who's the CEO of Climargy. He has background in the multilateral development world and then moving to the private sector. So, Alex, the floor is yours.
Thanks, Carla. So I have a quick slide. You know, there has been a very clear market failure for energy efficiency portfolio finance across not only developing and emerging economies, but as well as even developed and mature markets. In fact, I would hazard the theory that the ESCOs' difficulty in accessing capital, and I'm not talking just about the big multinational ESCOs, the ESCOs in general, have this difficulty of accessing capital even in financially mature markets. And I'm going to explain that a bit more during the discussion. So in my work in at least 14 Asian markets and a little bit in the Middle East, I've seen that there has been no aggregator. I've seen that up to 98% of ESCOs do not have suitable access to bank-based debt finance to pursue the real pipeline of performance contracts. Many of them can borrow, but they would typically max out their credit limit after 3 project loans and wait for their 10-year money to flow back to their treasury. So it's what happens to projects number 4, 5, 6, up to 20 in their pipelines. They don't get implemented at all. So it's really about understanding where ESCOs are limited. They're brilliant electromechanical engineers coming together, but they're unfortunately not gifted as financial engineers. So that's where Climargy comes in. We also want to correct the balance. There's been significant private sector capital flows towards renewable energy, especially grid-tied renewable energy projects, solar parks, wind farms, where project finance works. But unfortunately, at the scale of the typical ESCO performance contract, project finance does not work. And then lastly, there's no one taking upfront risk for expensive investment grade audits. Many ESCOs can do level 2, level 3 detailed energy audits. But when you ask them for an investment grade audit, that's where gaps persist in the market. So and this is where Climargy was built as a private sector attempt to deliver the super ESCO impacts that would bridge the very technical engineering world of ESCOs to a pool of money that can flow outside their balance sheets and outside the balance sheets of the end users. So that's what Climargy is all about. It's all about providing equity capital, off-balance sheet capital, to both the ESCOs and the building end users and even the factory owners. We're excited with the new and very ambitious energy efficiency law in the Philippines, where they have set relatively very low consumption thresholds. At 500,000 kilowatt hours a year, you start to have a long list of obligations under the law. And the government has whacked a big stick. If I don't put rooftop solar on my roof, I don't go to jail. But if I don't change my motors or my air conditioning, I may face up to 5 years jail time and face $2 million in fines. So this is a very serious government in trying to correct that imbalance between a pure renewable energy market transformation to one that's energy efficiency as clearly recognized as the first fuel in the energy transition. So Climergy has signed a very interesting joint development partnership agreement with one of the large energy conglomerates in the Philippines last December. This is with the Lopez Group, the first Philippine Holdings Corporation, as a unit called Pi Energy. And we have signed up an agreement where we're combining our expertise, our networks, and our capital to pursue a huge portion of our first $100 million worth of ESCO performance contracts in the next 5 to 10 years.
Excellent. Sounds extremely promising and lots of questions there. Taking notes. So next, I would like to introduce Esther Badiola. She's a senior economist at the Climate Office of the European Investment Bank's Operation Department. So Esther, please go ahead. And here, your slide is up. Thanks.
Yeah, good morning, everyone. I'm delighted to be here, and thank you for the invitation. So, as you may know, the European Investment Bank is the EU climate bank. We are owned by the 27 member states, and we have a commitment of dedicating at least 50% of our activities, our lending, to climate action and environmental sustainability from here until, well, from 2025 onwards. So since 2012, when we started tracking energy efficiency, the bank has increased lending quite considerably. So last year, we were close to 5 billion euros of lending to energy efficiency, of which 85% goes in the form of direct investment loans or intermediated loans, and only a small fraction of that goes into guarantees or equity investments in funds, and most of it goes to buildings. But even if it is quite impressive, this amount of close to 5 billion, I have to say that year after year is super challenging, because as Fred was saying just a minute ago, the market is very fragmented, and also what we see in Europe, and not so much outside the Union, it is heavily reliant on public incentives, no? So one of the formulas that we have explored and we have tried to develop is how to use these incentives to really unlock private finance. And this is the blending part that you see here. We have developed investment programs, like, for example, this one feature here, which is the private finance for energy efficiency, that is meant to be a triple leg instrument. So on one side, the bank will lend to a financial intermediary a loan, but this loan will come with public support in the form of technical assistance and also in the form of a de-risking facility. So like this investment, or like this program that we have developed with the financial intermediaries, we are developing others. And for example, one of our big clients of this program was Belfius in Belgium. And with them, we had a very successful outcome of, I don't recall now how many millions mobilized, but significant amounts. The other part that we are trying to develop, because as you were saying, Carla, normally the clients don't have energy efficiency as their main business. It's something that they don't understand, they don't even have awareness of. So one of the programs that we launched in the year 2012 was the ELENA program. The ELENA is a technical assistance program that covers energy audits, pre-feasibility studies, feasibility studies, and then this is paid off by the client, but then if they bring about investments, it is given back to them. So it's an incentive for them to invest.
And this has been also quite successful. It has mobilized 7.5 billion in the time that we have run the program. And for example, we also finance directly ESCOs like Renewable or Resalta. And so I would say we are open to explore any possibility in energy efficiency. Is one of the key issues and one of the key markets that we want to develop, such as yourselves, Abdel. But as I say, is challenging. A couple of weeks ago, one of our colleagues, the one that was managing the ELENA program, retired from the bank. And the two things that he said, was, I started on this 15 years ago. And in 15 years, it is true, we have mobilized a lot, but it's not that much. If you turn that into annual business, it's not that much. And then he started alone, and now he has a team or 15 people. So it requires a lot of work, a lot of hand-holding, a lot of accompanying and awareness raising. So, yeah, we are here, all of us, we are concerned, and I'm sure that in this conference we will come back with a lot of new and fresh ideas, but still the barriers are very high.
Thank you. I can see that. And just in terms of our participants, unfortunately, one of the participants who was going to join online, she cannot. And Dr. Kumar, is he here? Entering. So, okay. So in the meantime, while he gets prepared, let's jump into maybe some questions, and I'll maybe like to start with you, Jalel, in terms of you talked about the Super ESCO. Yes. So I want you to talk a little bit more about the Super ESCO. What exactly are you doing? What is your vision of the Super ESCO? And for that, I would like the support of the slides that we had remaining from the African Development Bank, please.
Okay, thank you. Thank you so much. Well, as you know, the best leader is leading by example. So this is the best way and the best approach. And we are asking since this morning from government to support on the legal framework, to put in place incentives and so on. But you know that governments are the best client for ESCOs. So we are not asking them to do projects. And this is one also of the weakness. We need to focus on that if you want really to drive the energy efficiency market in general, but especially for the ESCOs, to develop the ESCOs market. So normally governments should work on that and should lead by example. So why we ask them that? Because so most of the barriers will be resolved to increase awareness for the projects, for the energy efficiency, to take the lead on that and to show that energy efficiency is important, and I am starting with myself. So all others will follow on that, which is really very important. Also to initiate, to drive, and organize the energy efficiency stream. I mean, all the activities, it will be supported by the government through their energy efficiency project. And here I'm talking also about the capacity building, about also the financing, about the regulations and so on. So we will have the environment where we will tackle all these different issues and to support the implementation and not only the implementation, but also the evolution based on the market development, which is really very important. It's also to provide what we call useful capacity building. For many years, we are giving capacity building for the super ESCOs, for the ESCOs, for the investment grade audit, but at the end, they don't find projects where really to practice this capacity building. So that's why we call it really useful capacity building, because it is almost hands-on training on a real project, and where when we find a problem, then we will face it and we try to resolve the problems. Also to put in place the seed financing, and there is a different form based on the market readiness and so on. But at least will give the appropriate financing scheme. But you know the appropriate one, it's based on the client, based on the risk of the project. It's not one fit project that for everything. No, it's based on the development. And this is also when we say appropriate, it is also what I said earlier. It's to develop or to evolve based on the market demand and based on the progress and based also on the problems that we can face, which is really very important. And here there is, as was presented this morning from Galia about the Energy Efficiency and Renewable Source Fund in Bulgaria. This is one of the examples. So we can put dedicated fund for implementation. We can put also dedicated guarantee mechanisms based on the market needs, but also we can put some incentives, which is really interested on the fiscal, financial side, and so on. But this is also, as you said, it's complex. It's not easy to work in that, but it's exciting also. And this is what will bring also more complexity. It is the flexibility of the super ESCO model. In general, but in particular also on the energy performance contracting, because it is really very flexible based on the project and based on the contract itself. So there is different way. The main one, it is the guaranteed savings and also the shared savings. But between also there is spectrum based on the needs and based on the project. So this is really very important. If we can test all this based on these thousands of the projects that we have in the government facilities, we can start with the low risk projects like small changing lamping in the lamps in the school or lighting or some similar project where the ESCOs that can gain experience in that, because we are asking them to develop the project to look also for the clients. But if they do not have experience in the market, that for sure it will be really very difficult, and the client will perceive this high risk project and they will not be involved. But if we will have an ESCOs where they can develop 10, 20, 15 projects in the government facilities, this will help to support, because as also I said earlier, the demand is important. I mean, in all product we are having this sales and marketing department. But why we don't have it for the energy efficiency? This is a must and need to be there. We have to understand what are the needs of the customer at the end, based on his priority list, and bring solution to his problems or their problems. It's not just focusing on energy efficiency and using almost the same word in efficiency. As you said, they don't care about the energy efficiency. The most important how they are saving and what are the other benefits. If you bring something that meets, or at least it is there in their priority list, that for sure we can go. So if we will see the next step, the flexibility of the super ESCO, it is evolving based on the project and on the market. So they can present some guarantees for the project. So
can you please, sorry, exactly,
for the next slide, yes. So it is guaranteed the project. So if we do not have the savings, that for sure the ESCO will be paid. So low risk, really low risk project. And it is adapted financing mechanism also based on, as I said earlier, based on the market. So it is really flexible, that it can evolve step by step. Which is the beauty of the super ESCO. We have an increasing pipeline of a project. So we can start with the government facilities. As I said, it is already huge and 100,000 of projects, but also can be extended later to the other sectors where the private sector or the ESCOs, they can also offer this energy performance contracting to the commercial and industrial sector. It is a little bit complex, but at least they gain this kind of experience that we are looking for. The beauty also that it's targeting specific sectors or technologies through the super ESCO. We can have different form of structure. So it can be, as for example, the one that we are developing in Rabat, in Morocco. It is own stated entity. It will be as a super ESCO. In Kenya, it is the utility, but also it can be a special purpose vehicle or others. So the form, will be based on the country's needs and the reality. Even if from my side, I prefer also the super ESCO utility based, because it is also in some countries we will benefit from this relationship between the clients and also the utilities, since they are experts in the energy efficiency, and also honestly, because on the financing side, when, for example, as a development bank, it's much easier to work on on the sovereign loan rather than the private one. I'm talking about the advantages on working on that, because at the final benefit will go to the client at the end. And for sure, we can get also real energy efficiency indicators through the project, implemented project, because it's one of the problems that we are not talking about it today, but it's really very important. We can implement projects, but if we don't know how we are going or what are the problems and what are the indicators based on this, through the super ESCO, yes, we can get all these indicators. We can put in place benchmarking tool that help us to see and to monitor our progress made on the energy efficiency side, which is, I think, it's one of the important pillars. So this morning, Brian said it is the ESCO day, it's coming. So I'm saying, no, the ESCO day, it's today. Let's work together to make it today. Why it's coming? Because I believe that together we can make these changes. We have to push the government on implementing projects. It's not on just working on the legal framework or put in place. No, implement projects. Start with research, lead by example. And this is what we are doing at the African Development Bank. We can say that we are succeeded up to now. And we think that this is the only way where we can support the energy efficiency market development, the ESCO market development, and especially to involve the private sector in investing in the energy efficiency market.
Perfect, thank you. So before going into more questions, I would like to welcome Dr. Satish Kumar. I hope everything's sorted. It was you just sort of arrived in the middle, but basically what we've been talking is about the experiences of trying to really bring up the ESCO model to scale it up. What are the different panelists doing through their respective organizations to do that? So in this case, I would like to welcome you, Dr. Kumar. He's the President and Executive Director of the Alliance for an Energy Efficient Economy. And again, I would like to ask if you could use a couple of minutes to introduce the initiative that it's being supported.
Okay. So first of all, thank you. Delighted to be here. I thought I will not be here, but I somehow made it for a little bit of interaction. Looks like I got hit with heat stroke. India is experiencing 47, 48 degrees Celsius. And first I canceled the trip and then my luggage didn't come. But I somehow made it. So happy to be here. And also, I think when I was hearing Jalil speak, it almost seemed like all the points that I wanted to make, you were already making those points. So this also goes back that we have been talking about ESCO for the last 25, 30 years. And sometimes the more we talk, the more things remain the same. I mean, you can pick up a ESCO conference from today, and we used to joke, or 10 years ago or 20 years ago, and you see that, okay, financing, okay, guaranteed savings, okay, energy audits, I think measurement and verification, all these topics do not change. So what I'm probably not going to go, because the slide is busy, maybe on the second slide I'll speak a little bit. But the challenge is, I think, I completely agree that there has been a lot of talk about ESCOs. People understand the concepts, and I think why this model actually should be a win-win model. And still, the transaction costs are pretty high. The contracting mechanism is perceived as very complex. And it's not just the capacity building from the provider side. I think I've always been a big champion that while you make financing available, make energy auditors, I think, available in the country, make them understand IPMVP and different M&V concepts and options. But if you are not actually educating and creating awareness from the demand side, I think you are going to have a disconnect. And this is, in my opinion, what I have seen, that I have been working in India for 15 years, and before that I was working in the US, where a lot of IPMVP related work happened, and I was involved in a very deep way on the technical side of things, and even the Federal Energy Management Program on the US side. But the challenge is that in the US, or maybe I think it may be true for some of the European countries, that there is programmatic budgets that are assigned to ESCO programs, which doesn't happen. In India, there is no programmatic budget, I think, in how to actually prepare government ministries or their facility managers or their procurement departments to tell them that how will this work, I think what are the things that they need to be aware of, and how this partnership is going to work. You cannot be finding fault, I think, and trying to have a gotcha mentality that ESCO make a mistake and try to do something like this. So I feel that the capacity building needs to happen on both the sides. FEM program used to have something called project facilitators. And I do feel that project facilitator is a great idea because they are neutral, I think, technical people who understand financing, who understand M&V. And they were not only, I think, they were also batting for ESCO to some extent, but at the same time, they were also trusted advisors of the government ministries and the customers, I think, who are interested in executing the project. The other thing that I would just want to highlight, we have to get projects. I mean, you can do as much capacity building as you want, but if you do not have a 10 million, 50 million, 100 million market, I think, for ESCOs annually, then the likes of the Schneider Electric and Siemens and ABBs and many of the utilities companies, they will just not have the critical mass to invest. I ran Schneider Electric's ESCO business for 2 years in India. And the thing was that they said 2 years, if you can generate $100 million, then we will actually turn it into a real business. Otherwise, we will shut down the shop. And they didn't give me 2 years. They actually shut it down like in 1.5 years because we are close to about 50, 60 million. And they said you cannot reach to, I think, 100 million. So it doesn't make sense for us. But I will tell that in India, I think some of the people may have heard that our finance minister, Mrs. Sitaraman, she mentioned in the budget speech that energy efficiency is very important for India. And we should be looking at ESCO model to actually bring in private sector capital to improve the infrastructure of the next decade or 2 decades that we are talking about. And that is, I think, a very, very good sign because India, still a lot of focus is on new buildings. So people are still not focusing on existing buildings, which is very unlike Europe, I think, where all the focus is on existing buildings. And the fact that I think a finance minister was talking about and saying that we need to actually make it and we will change the general financing rules. And as a result of that, what has happened, that Ministry of Power has written to most of the ministries, and this is something that AEEE was, I think, advocating, that government should be writing and saying that, can you actually 10 ministries or 15 ministries talk about 5 or 10 buildings and create a pipeline of $100 million to begin with? And forget about, I think, all the complexities about IGAs and M&V and other things. If we are able to create a decent size of, I think, a pipeline, my opinion is that all the rest of the stuff will follow suit, basically. Because then I think there is a critical mass, companies will come in, and they will start to putting money, and this thing will fly. So I think that's the second piece. The third piece, maybe we can go to the next slide, is that we feel that in India there are 2 kinds of, and I am focusing on buildings, I'm not even talking about industry. We are talking that even Indian buildings, we should have 2 models. One is like which are very energy intensive facilities. We are talking about hospitals, hotels, airports, retail malls and other things where you need investment grade audits, you need rigorous measurement and verification. And the second one is that a lot of the government buildings which have been built over the last 3-4 decades, they are not very energy intensive, but they are still energy inefficient. So you can replace the fluorescent tube lights with LEDs. You can replace fans. There are tons of fans in India with BLDC fans, which can cut down the energy consumption by 50%. You can replace a room air conditioner or split air conditioners with 5-star or like B's air conditioner program. And it doesn't require very sophisticated ESCO programs. So I think that's what I have just put it out there, that even when you are trying to get this market going, you can have these 2 things. And people may have been aware of Energy Efficiency Services Limited, which acted as the super ESCO. And it did try to actually do a lot of energy efficiency retrofits, but they were operating on the left-hand side. They were not operating on the right-hand side,
which requires engineering expertise, which requires project management skills, and which requires deep M&V skills. And I think that's the point that we are also telling the government, that divide the projects into two buckets. I think the first left-hand side bucket can happen very quickly. You can do it in 3-4 months, 6 months. You can recover the money in like 3 years or 4 years, you can recover the money. And for the right-hand side, which will have a longer time payback, you need to build capacity. Climate financing is going to be important, I think, if you can start to put in. And even if some of the municipal corporations and others, they are not able to pay money, provide some, I think, risk financing. So that, and ESL has been kind of like a little bit in trouble because they are saying they have not been able to recover the money for the, I think, money that they have invested, because the municipalities or some of the state governments' budget is not good. But so what? I mean, you give so much of subsidies, I think, to coal power plants and others. So why can't you subsidize, I think, energy efficiency? So I think these are like just very quickly some of my thoughts that I just wanted to share. And I think you're happy to answer any questions. So thank you very much.
Thank you. So I really want to thank you for your thoughts. And I think there are a lot of points that have been like shared here. And one of them has to do with the role of government, the fact of leading by example, the fact of what can they do, these subsidies. And Soren spoke at the beginning of this, like sugarcoating the cherry on the pie already. And it's how to think of like reallocating resources, how the public sector is using those resources maybe to subsidize specific technologies, to subsidize certain things, to at the end maybe help the market run on its own. And in that case, I would like to ask for your, like, Alex, starting with you, what's your take in terms of like the role that the government needs to have in terms of like supporting this off balance versus, because we need like the depth, but we need the off balance as well. We need to de-risk. So how can we sort of, what, if you have them in front of you, what would be your recommendation to them?
Well, government should set the enabling environment, right? The government should set the policy framework that would create the pipeline of projects that ESCO need. I was given an example of whacking the big stick in the Philippines. And we should review energy efficient laws across the region. Singapore and Indonesia, for example, have very high consumption thresholds before you get obligations, several times larger, 100 times larger than that of the Philippines. And no wonder majority of the commercial buildings and factories there are simply continuing voluntary energy efficiency programs. So not at the pace that would create enough demand for the ESCOs in Singapore and Indonesia as well. The government should also accelerate, and this is very important, where applicable, government should accelerate the phase out of energy subsidies. It's making ESCO investments and third-party investments less attractive to third-party investors, such as Climergy. So, we see most of Southeast Asia energy tariff and gas prices still heavily subsidized. The first two markets to remove effectively most of the subsidies would be Singapore and the Philippines. But for the rest, if I were to do a chilled water plant upgrade in Manila and do a chilled water plant in Kuala Lumpur or Malaysia, you'll see different paybacks. And you'll see mid-teens probably in the Philippines, but because of the energy tariff in Malaysia and Indonesia, for example, I'll probably be lucky if I hit double-digit internal rate of return. So it's really about accelerating that phase out of energy subsidies, changing behavior with strong policy frameworks, because renewable energy happens because of the entrepreneurial spirit of the investors, but energy efficiency, unfortunately, is more painful. It's really getting human, even if you set a law, it's really getting them out of that inertia. And you need a strong policy framework. You need an incentive framework to make that happen across markets.
Okay, thank you. And Fred, if I can go to you, what about the role of the government in this case in terms of also as a consumer? At the end, they have a huge purchasing power. I don't know how's the reality in Canada. And also, I would say in terms of, you said you finance super ESCOs, like the role of the government in those super ESCOs, and maybe any recommendations to Yalel on that they are building.
So in Canada, the public sector already has a relationship with ESCOs, and that it already contracted through energy performance contracts, energy savings contracts over the years. At least at the federal and provincial level, where governments have an abundant access to capital and a lot of building, but they struggle to go to the small municipal governments that don't have as much access to capital and have fewer or smaller buildings. Similarly, on the private side, ESCOs have not been as active because the financial markets were not fairly ready to lend to energy efficiency projects. They didn't understand the risk profile, the measurements and verification process. And so I think government is and has put its money into its own buildings. It will continue to do so, but it's only a small portion of the real estate market. And so the challenge then is now for government to create incentives and regulations to make it more expensive not to retrofit. And so our colleagues in the Natural Resources Canada are working on our green building strategy to try to think about those incentives and regulations for the future, so that it becomes the cost to emit GHGs is higher. And as the cost to emit is higher, then the investments to reduce GHG emissions will be better. In the meantime, the bank, being a federal government entity also, in the meantime, we're working with the super ESCOs and providing them with affordable financing. We're trying to develop with that standardized contracts, standardized investment procedures, standardized reporting, so that we can start that ball rolling and get investment into the private sector deep retrofit, work with private financial institutions also to come in with us and learn the business, learn to get comfortable with that risk profile, and work with us to create a market on the private side. So there's no one solution to this problem, right? We need to address it in different ways. So as you address the cost of emitting, making it more expensive, and we are also providing the cheaper financing, then we can make the economics work and make this an investable product. But that's going to take time, right? And so right now, working with super ESCOs, that's our first tool. We're also working with large building owners. That's our second tool. And our third tool would be to work with private banks to go and get them used to the market and get them engaged. The government cannot do it alone. In Canada, we have objectives in the building sector of a reduction of 42 megatons of emissions. That's billions and billions of dollars in investment. And the government cannot finance it all. We have to have the private sector put their money in it also and see the benefits of doing that.
Perfect, thank you. And Esther, like you are there, like with the public sector. So what's happening now? Europe is moving quite fast in all the sustainability area, I would say.
Mm-hmm.
We have the European taxonomy as well that's covering like climate change mitigation and adaptation, and clearly energy efficiency is there. So how do you feel this will accelerate? Maybe your colleague who recently retired, who said, okay, we have in 15 years, we have made some progress. Do we have a hope for or what should
Indeed,
happen?
One of his comments was, and I was thinking about that when you were speaking, some of my colleagues would be collapsing on the floor, and convulsing, when you were saying that, it is not necessary to go to the deepest or to the deepest technical detail, and the EU taxonomy goes into this detail. And one of the things that he was saying is that it's becoming so complex in terms of technical eligibility of energy efficiency that maybe we are pursuing the excellence when already the good is quite good enough. So one of the things that I would say for regulation is that we need to strive for something that is proportionate with the effort. So at the EIB, we are very exhaustive, and we follow the European Commission in all their guidance. But then when you go and talk to the financial intermediaries, there is an issue there. They really are or require more guidance to be able to implement the EU taxonomy for energy efficiency, because it goes very much into the technical detail, and they are not ready to do that. So, and if they are not ready, the worst is that they are not able to communicate to their clients. So by wanting to do it very well, perhaps we are involuntarily putting ourselves a little bit in a difficult position. I am not saying that this is not the correct thing, but I think that we need to work a lot in communicating and in this guidance and in this implementation to really make it profitable for us. What is critical is to be able to work with the financial intermediaries, because they are going to be the aggregators of energy efficiency investments and the ones that are communicating with the clients again. So it is really of immense importance that they can communicate and that regulation is conducive to facilitate this work for them.
Perfect, thank you. And Dr. Kumar, you had in your slide this like sort of this really low-hanging fruit and the not so low-hanging fruit. Like in terms of the left, what role do you see to the government? Again, maybe as a consumer, the fact that they are the ones who own a lot of buildings, a lot of facilities, so and also the willingness to jump into this kind of projects, particular to India, or given your experience somewhere else as well.
Yeah, so I think it just very quickly, I think I saw maybe Jalal's thing where he said that there should be some specific technologies that need to be targeted, and these technologies can be complex, or these technologies can be plug and play as well. And I think the key point here is that when we are looking for lighting, when we are looking for cooling technologies in India, even though I think it is likely to become one of the biggest markets, but it's still very, very decentralized. There is not a whole focus on building big central power plants or district cooling plants. So most of the government buildings and most of the affordable housing and others, if you say that we have 600 million fans in India, and they consume about, say, anywhere between 10 to 15 gigawatts, okay, or maybe perhaps more. If you replace, they consume about 70 watts, 60 to 70 watts, because they could be like having a lifetime of 20 to 30 years. And if you say that we have technologies, which is variable frequency drives or BLDC motors and other things, and you say that you can actually replace all the 600 million fans, but it will probably require $20–30 billion actually to do that. But straight away, it can cut India's generation capacity by 10 to 15 gigawatts. So it's probably like 20 to 30 gigawatt, and it can cut it down by 50%. You don't need an ESCO to actually do this work, right? So I think my take is a little bit different in the sense that sometimes we make things too complicated. India has a lot of LED penetration. Globally, it has LED penetration. But because by combining bulk procurement and sort of like targeting public sector buildings and affordable homes, which is the most vulnerable sections actually, if you look at the building quality and other things. So if you are talking about climate justice, if you are talking about climate financing, many of these things can be done in a very simple manner. Why do you need to make it too much complex by bringing in, I think, a lot of things? I was heavily involved in the development of IPMVP for close to about 8 to 10 years. I mean, that was the project that I was doing when I was at Lawrence Berkeley National Lab. We still do CMVP and PMVA and the new versions, and we are creating, I think, a certified M&V kind of like professionals who can actually advise. But people are saying that why we are not like a capital-rich country. We need to do things a little bit more frugally. And if you are going to gold plate everything, then it's just not going to happen. So I think the challenge is that we do need to actually, I mean, horses for courses, you can say, or I think whatever terminology that you want to use. But one size cannot fit all. I think that is, the main point that I am saying. And in India, I will tell you that even if you go to a government contracting department and an ESCO comes in and he will say that, okay, I'm going to do a central plant retrofit, I'm going to fit out your lighting, I'm going to do your fans replacement, they will take the fan replacement and other things out of that contract. They'll say, we will do this ourselves. Why should we pay you with all your, I think, engineering skills? Because this I will go directly to the vendors, and I will negotiate probably a better price than you, ESCO, can negotiate with me. So I think the dynamics and kind of like the procurement process and the capital requirement and other things is so diverse and so different, I think, in sometimes when I look at the developed country, how do they operate and how do the developing countries operate and what is the real time requirement that we are talking about. So that's the reason I'm saying that where you need engineering complexity, where you need project management skills, where you need climate financing, where you need financial, because otherwise you are making it too complex. And I think in the meantime, we are not able to scale the market. So I think that's my main thing. And government, public sector can be a leader. I think they can clearly develop a pipeline of projects. You can walk before you run. They see, I think, how this model works, and then you can actually start to do more we are doing like benchmarking for about 100 largest airports in India. And we are trying to do it benchmark with, because airport quality has improved in India also. But still, I think they are saying that if we have to cut down the energy prices by 30%, then I think what is the best way to do this? And there are discussions with the Airport Authority of India. Similarly, an entity like Coal India Limited, which is in the coal business, they are looking at sustainable mining, and they are looking at ESCO model, and they are saying we need to improve our infrastructure, and we need to embrace energy efficiency for at least our buildings, and for the procurement of like our heavy, I think, earth moving equipment or digging equipment and other things. So changes are happening. I mean, it's not that I think things are not happening, but also they are very, very price sensitive, and they are saying that we want to actually do the best that we can with the limited resources that we have.
You know, absolutely, I agree with that, but I think also at the same time, in the government of India is very sort of like progressive in that sense, because that's a barrier that I'm pretty sure we face in many other developing countries, where that willingness maybe of the government to say, okay, no, we buy the funds because, I don't know, it's going to be, I don't know, cheaper, we don't need this technical expertise for that. They even don't know it, or they don't have the resources, they sort of get lost on this thing, or they want to see the impact. They prefer to use that, like whatever money, in cutting a new ribbon or something in the short term. But really, thank you for your like all your feedback and inputs. Given the time, I would like to open the floor for 1 or 2 questions, so then we can do some closing remarks, and then I want to give you the space also if you want to comment anything. We've been many ideas as second panel, but before I'd like to open the floor. So if there's any question on the floor, please raise your hand, and in that case, I would ask you to state your name or your affiliation, and of course your question and who to. There, the gentleman in the back, there, you're going to be given a microphone. Thank you.
My name is Charles Kiara. I come from the Renewable Energy Efficiency Center, ECOWAS, which is ECOWAS ECRI. Thank you very much for the presentation, very exciting information and very relevant for the promotion of energy efficiency. My question is addressed to the African Development Bank and the European Investment Bank. And the question is, given the complication in this, the complication of energy efficiency, how do you feel the relevance of regional structures in the promotion of energy efficiency? I know in the European Union it's very easy because you have rule, you have regulation, so it can make things easy. But in terms of Africa, for example, I mean, the borders are not really closed. If you say something cannot come in, you can always go and take inefficient appliances. You don't need to follow the official road. It can come in. So, and we need an enforcement body, I believe, to be able to go beyond what a country is doing. You've been conducting projects, for example, in Cote d'Ivoire, in Morocco, but for me, this is a localized one because you can do it in one part of Cote d'Ivoire or Senegal, but the inefficient equipment, for example, will flow through on the other side. So it looks like you are feeding good equipment, but at the bottom there's a hole. There's a hole, you feed and it's going down. So it may not be very efficient unless you find a way. What's the strategy are you putting in place as African structure to strengthen a regional body who can make rule and regulation to be able to stop this aspect? And I would like to get the experience from the European Union, how they are doing this aspect. My second question is more.
Sorry, can I ask? I just want to see whether there's any other question, because it's one or two. Otherwise, like if we can answer that, and then I'll go for the second. Thank you. Any other question from any other participant, please? So let me go to the panel first in that case.
Okay, thank you so much. Thank you, Shar, for this. Well, your question is not really related to the energy efficiency, but the reality of the African context and the countries, but it's beyond energy efficiency. However, how we can tackle this? I mean, we can use energy efficiency to resolve some of the problems. The first one, which is we need to elevate energy efficiency in the government priority, which is really very important. I mean, as I said earlier, we need to create the demand, but the demand also comes from putting in place the pillars to resolve the problems. First, to identify problems and to resolve. We cannot resolve energy efficiency, everything with the energy efficiency. The parallel market, it's a reality in Africa, and it is a huge problem. And this is even if you are putting maps in place on the regional side, there is a market that we do not have control on it. And countries even, they cannot have control on it. But what could be done, how we can elevate the energy efficiency in the agendas of the government, which is really very important. And here, I guess I'm talking about the African context, where the DFIs need to work together and closely to support governments in pushing energy efficiency as the priorities, not only through capacity buildings, not only through very small projects. No, as I said earlier, we need to have programs and include energy efficiency as mandatory in the, for example, for all the projects, we are making assessment for environment and social impact. Environment should include energy efficiency, should be a part of that. So considering the energy efficiency first concept, it's a must. It's not an option at all. Using the green procurement, it's a must. It's not an option today. So this is how we need to work together. So I'm just calling all the DFIs or also collateral, multilateral cooperation institutions, NGOs, to work together to put in place, if you can call it the same reference for the countries related to the energy efficiency. We have RISE, the regulatory index for sustainable development. We have the energy efficiency assessment in each of the countries. So let's work on that, the same reference, to support these countries to move a little bit toward the energy efficiency, instead of having different actions in different ways and different directions. We are not converging to the same objective. And this is how we can support the prioritization and elevation of the energy efficiency in the government sector, and especially priorities.
I also tend to agree with Abdel. The problem with creating a regional entity and then trying to set up a regulation is the enforcement. If you don't have a legal obligation by the countries that they will take this regional body, and whatever they say, they will need to enforce it, you really cannot make it compulsory. Even in the European Union, where you have this legal base, you always have countries that are a little bit more difficult in terms of implementation of specific directives or specific measures. So I would agree that the best thing would be to create this type of regional programs, and then create this healthy competition between countries. Whenever one is going to see that they have better hospitals, better schools, better public sector, then that will create, hopefully, a mechanism. And then information and hand-holding, and try to facilitate that these countries individually can take these decisions by themselves.
So thank you. Given the time, I would really like to ask you maybe to do the other question, like to the panelists later on, because I would like to give one chance to the panelists, your last seconds of fame here in this panel, to share with you any thoughts or any recommendations to your peer panelists, or even to, Dr. Kumar, you were not here, but to members of the previous panel. Just a few seconds each, and I'm just going to start in the physical order here. So let me start with Alex.
Okay, thank you, Carla. Just three very quick points. Number one, governments, another task or role for them is to is to buy ESCO services, support the ESCO sector by buying their services. The U.S. and Chinese ESCO markets grew up to be the two largest ESCO markets because governments bought their services. We don't have to go to the extreme of the U.S. where 95 to 98% of $7 to $8 billion market was bought by government. But it still supported the growth of ESCO. Second, do not underestimate the role of ESCO associations. Civil society plays a huge role. In the Philippines, PE2 pushed the energy efficiency bill in Congress, supporting the executive branch of government. Third, Climergy, together with our Lopez Group of partners, we finally found this marriage because we both agree that energy efficiency portfolio of ESCO project assets becomes a new exciting energy investment asset class. So it's apart from renewable. So let renewables be one asset class, but let an ESCO project asset portfolio be another asset class that will have its own risk management framework and investment guidelines.
Yalel, please.
Thank you so much. So I'll be really very brief. It's simple. I'll say always we are trying to find out what are the problems. It's not enough. Always I say what we can do together, because it's your responsibility. It's all our responsibility. It's not the government. It's not the client. It's our responsibility. Let's focus together what we can do together to make the real changes that we want to see. And this is, I think, the most important. We will focus on the country's needs. We will have one reference that together we will work together to make it really happen. So as simple as that.
Thank you. Esther?
Exactly that, because financing alone is not sufficient to tap this market. I would say just three elements that for us I think are important. The first one is aggregators, the second one educators, and the third one regulators. So the three of them and the combination of them will make this happen, hopefully.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Dr.
I think
Kumar.
I'll say that government has to play a very, very important role. And they have to create a pipeline of projects and a demand for ESCO services. I do believe that I think if that starts to happen, a lot of things will fall into place. The second piece I would say is that we need to look at equity financing as well. I think the ESCO market has relied on debt financing, but I do speak to, I think, the India partner for Actis. It is one of the largest renewable energy. And I keep asking that, I think, and they say that give us a decent size, 100 million, 200 million worth of market. We will figure out things. You don't have to worry about financing. You don't have to worry about M&V. I think you give us the scale and the size, a lot of things will happen. So I think you're bringing equity, but you need to have that critical mass. And the third piece is, I would say that, again, government is important, but also, I think the greasing of the skids and I think the project facilitators to actually continue the capacity building and educating in a very, very focused manner and not try to do something which is not going to lead to an impact in the near term. So I think impact is very, very important. I think if we don't have a lot of time, I think let's work together. Thank you very much.
Fred, last but not least at all.
Thank you. I feel like I have more to learn from this panel than to teach anyone, frankly, in this room. But to me, I mean, I go back to many of the comments I've heard today. There's not one magic solution. They need to be adapted to the jurisdiction you're in, to the market you work in, and to the challenges you have in your market. I think in ours, it's really the fragmentation and the wide diversity of clients and educating the clients. But going back to the demand side and the importance of the client, making sure the clients understand what's in it for them. And our biggest success so far have been with clients that already want to have a positive impact on their greenhouse gas reduction, and then we bring in the financing. We have not had as much success attracting, going to the CFOs and then the other people. We have a better success going to the CEO, strategists, and ESG people, then working with the financiers. So putting the client back into the bullseye and making sure they understand the benefit of retrofit is very important.
Thank you. And apart from thanking all the panelists, I would like just to, I don't know, do some kind of like summary of ideas that I have like in my mind or written in this paper somehow. And it has to do with, I wouldn't like the supply side, the money is there. And now with this whole like from the alliances for net zero, the banking sector, investment sector, the funds are going to be there. So we're talking about really promoting the demand side. Governments are going to be present, are present here at this conference, and I think the message from the previous panel and this panel is clear in terms of the role that they need to play. It's not as observers at all, it's not just as regulators, they are enablers, but they're also consumers. We're talking about green procurement, we talk them about being ESCO consumers, etc. And that has to do also with the demand side. It's like they need to lead by example, because by showing, others are going to understand the model, are going to understand the benefits inherited in it, and then they're going to be able to implement it and feel more comfortable. But from the de-risking side, we also need several elements that has to do, of course, with capacity building, but we have to start thinking very creatively in terms of balance or equity, things like that. I even put on the table something that goes beyond like the traditional ESCO models, and it's the idea of servitization, how by now providers, instead of like selling products, they sell the service, because now you transfer all the incentives to that provider to be efficient. And that's something that has to be put into the table within this sort of broader ESCO framing. And something very good. Let's think about good and not perfection. Let's move one step forward and not two forward and then three backwards. I know we are in a rush. We need to have like and see action and impact within the next 8 years at least. But that's why we are here, and that's why I think we have a really good like opportunity to send this message to the governments that their role is key. So with that, I really want to thank everyone. And Mel, I don't know if you, because this is the end of the event, but I don't know if there's going to be some closing words. No, so on behalf of everyone, I would really like to thank you again. And please use this great opportunity, this physical event, to network with each other. Fred, in particular to you, I want to thank you for the early hours that you are like connected from there. Please keep in touch with your peer panelists. As you said, like for me, it was the same experience. I have so much to learn from always interacting with different people. Thank you, Alex. Thank you, Yalel. Thank you, Esther. Thank you, Dr. Kumar. Thanks, everyone. Bye.